Hi everyone, and welcome back to another video regarding sociology and this week's topic of the family. In the last video we examined what family is, as well as the different structures and kinds of family, which we'll also get into in one of the later parts of the video too, a little bit of a more zoomed in approach and individual. But in this video we are going to take the theoretical side of family just for a little bit. And hopefully by now you understand the differences in functionalism, conflict, and feminist and interactionist perspectives. Your quiz for this week is a little bit heavy in those, even though for some reason, I'm not really sure why I decided to do it that way, but I did. So make sure you're paying attention and you just understand the differences. Also, just look for the key words in the questions as well. The question asks you about the inequality of the family. You know, hopefully by now, that whenever I see inequality, it should either be conflict or feminist theories. If it's not talking about anything regarding gender, it's going to be a conflict theorist approach. So just a little bit of a hint for you guys there. So do we even need the family? Is the family necessary? And the views on this are mixed because of the perspective that you take, right? That's one of the glorious things about sociology, is the different lenses that you can kind of put on in order to see exactly, well, do we even need the family? Conflict theorists would say no, because families contribute to different societal injustices, and we can kind of see all those injustices that are panning out right now in our 2021 lives. Functionalists say yes, because the family socializes you and it helps keep society stable due to the socialization and the ability to care for others. Interactionists, they would say yes and no, depending on the relationship that you have within the family that's occurring. Some families are strife with abuse and violence and not very healthy relationships, and so if it's better to not have a family unit and just have people living separately or alone, they would say that we don't need it. However, if the relationships that are occurring within the family are healthy and good and satisfies that need to connect, they would say then yes, we do need the family. So interactions are a little bit iffy on that one. And then feminists, they're a complicated answer as well. We're going to revisit the reproduction of mothering that I talked about in our last time's videos. I want to say last week, but it really wasn't last week. But in examining the role of mother and wife and women in the family, since that's also complicated, as some women do want to be homemakers and things like that, which is totally acceptable, whereas others don't even want to have children, or some women don't even want to have children, don't even want to get married, and that kind of thing, and that's totally okay as well. So we'll examine that a little bit more in this series. So regarding the functionalist perspective, remember, functionalism is looking at what's the purpose of the family, how do we make it so that society remains stable. And so we have a theorist named Ogburn, or Ugburn, from the 1930s, and he kind of proposed different ways that the family can promote this stability of society. And the first one, kind of similar to way back when we were examining societies and the functions of them and how to make them kind of continue, is reproduction as well as population growth. You have to replace your dying members in your society. You have to replace your dying members of your family. So one of the functions of the family would be to reproduce. The second one is protection. So one of the important aspects of family is to protect as well as upbring the children, teach them, socialize them, which is the next one. But make sure that they're safe, since if you're reproducing them, you gotta make sure that they make it to adulthood so that that cycle can start all over again. kind of the cat out of the bag with the next one regarding socialization, thinking about that transmission of culture, those norms regarding society, but also just within the family as well. Maybe there's a familial culture, language, that's not necessarily the one that's spoken within society, that kind of thing. That would be one aspect there. The next one is sexual regulation. So regarding that one, that's just basically how what standards of sexual behavior there are, and this changes over time. And learning about the norms of the society that you're in and the behaviors that are occurring there, as well as the different customs for creating a family as well. So knowing how to date people or knowing how to meet people and that kind of thing, get ready for having a family and that kind of aspect. In addition to, there's also something that's called the incest taboo, which, as the name kind of sounds, is just basically having that cultural rule or norm that prohibits any sexual relations between members of the same family. So having a relationship with your mom, with your dad, we kind of joke about here in America with your cousin, those kind of different societal norms. And then another function of the family is affection and companionship. So usually the family is the first thing that you come into contact with as soon as you're born. And so having those needs fulfilled for affection as well as companionship, helping them feel safe and secure and satisfied. So that's that one. And then the provision of social status. So thinking about the ascribed statuses that we're born with, right? Our race and ethnicity that due to social stratification really puts you into a certain spot depending on the characteristics that you have. We inherit that social status from our family, and thinking about that social mobility and the ability to be mobile, that's also a function of the family. For some family members, this is a good thing, right? If you're in a pretty good family, well off, lots of opportunities, but for other families, at least a little bit of an instability issue. And then there's also a lot of other roles that the family also has, which some of you have talked about in your discussion posts way back when, but Ogborn doesn't really include these as the main, we have 6 here, functions of the family, just because there are other social institutions whose main job is to provide that learning. So for instance, with religious training, we have the social institution of religion. With education nowadays is bigger. It used to be that education just was near the fireplace, but now there's professionals working in schools. There's teachers who go to school to teach, as well as different recreational outlets as well. You have different leagues that have been created. You have different aspects via the media, right? The media is a social institution. You also have the internet and esports and all of these different types of abilities out there. So that's why Ogborn, obviously we didn't have the internet back in the 30s, but that's why Ogborn didn't include those different types of learning within his 6 major ones, is just because we have other social institutions to do that already. And as I was kind of saying in my intro to this chapter, conflict theorists don't really view the family as a contributor to stability, but rather as a reflection of inequality and wealth and power too. And And thinking about that, kind of tailing off of that family identification that ascribes status, you see the economic unit of the family and how being a specific social class impacts children greatly. Not being able to have food affects a child's health, affects a child's ability to, or living in poverty as well. You're not able to afford the different things that could make a child be well off. And then thinking about going to school and things like that, you're just in debt your whole entire life, which isn't cool. So being well off economically is extremely beneficial for the next generation, but what if you're not well off economically? How does the next generation kind of struggle with what their life chances are in regards to that? So that's just one aspect of the conflict theorists' approach to the family. You can also examine the involvement of men in their families, how men have been traditionally seen as the breadwinner, not necessarily involved in parenting, and that also creates an inequality of roles. That's a little bit more of a feminist perspective, but and seeing how that has affected the composition of families, as well as I don't even remember what it's called, but anyway, so just seeing how the role of men not being at home has really impacted the structure of the family, even though it could be impacting the economic aspect of the family pretty okay. There are other aspects that haven't been. So there's an inequality that's going on there. And then also in thinking about mothering, and fathering and parenting, I guess, in general, I brought up The Reproduction of Mothering by Nancy Chodorow in my last video series, in examining the gender roles and how girls are kind of just forced into that system of thinking about wanting to become a mother, and they're kind of socialized into being that way. Whereas with guys, they're not necessarily socialized into becoming fathers. So just examining the socialization that occurs for those instances. And even if guys do want to become stay-at-home dads, for instance, or something like that, for every one stay-at-home dad, there's 5 stay-at-home moms. So still there's a little bit of an inequality going on there. And another aspect in thinking about, this is more to the relationship side of the aspect of family, but thinking about that male dominance, that patriarchy, but also including, like I was saying, how in some families there's bad things that are occurring, and that includes the increases in domestic violence, especially during COVID-19. So domestic violence reports have increased, and France especially has seen a extremely large increase in the amount of domestic violence being reported. Remember, being reported. It could mean that there's more that is occurring and people aren't reporting it. So that's something to be aware of as well. But so that's just one aspect of thinking about COVID's impact on the family as well. There's been a lot of domestic violence that's been occurring. Not everywhere. Remember, you can't really extrapolate, but there has been increases worldwide of this phenomenon. And finally, we're examining our interactionists. And interactionists really push for people to see that the family is extremely complex, it's complicated, it's messy, and not many people realize that, right? Because many people like to just generalize about the family, like, oh, the family is breaking down, And saying statements like that is extremely dangerous, or the family is doing this, because it might not apply to all families, right? Especially due to the composition of families and what they might include, right? It could, for instance, like marriage. Marriage can be between a man and a woman, two men or two women, um, and all the different definitions of that as well. In addition, as well, thinking about the complexity of the family, parenting is also now becoming more common both before and after marriage, as well as if marriage doesn't occur, just between two people who are cohabitating, for instance, and are in a relationship. So it's less of a taboo to have kids before marriage nowadays. So interactionists are all about examining these complex relationships. They also examine the meaning of a family. So what is family? Which is an incredibly deep question if you think about it, as well as the different ways that family members interact and the different roles that these family members have within that certain family. And in addition to this, you can also examine the interactions of a family, taking it from a psychological approach. So this guy kind of up here in the left-hand corner, Eric Berne, he is more of a psychoanalytic theorist. So for my psychology folks, that means he kind of studies under Freud. So this unconscious is a big thing that he likes to study. And but within this theory, you can examine the different functions as well as dysfunctions of our interactions with one another based on the communicator, and the different ways in terms of not just parenting but family. We can kind of see here. It's called the PAC model, I think, or I just call it the PAC model. But I'm thinking about that. You have different ego states. So you have the parent, adult, and child. And in the parent state, you have behaviors, thoughts, and feelings that are basically copied from your parents or from your parental figures. And so therefore you kind of use your parents to figure out how to behave, think, and feel. We kind of think about the methods of observation that you might have done growing up, or if you think about Albert Bandura and his social learning theory, that would be kind of part of the parent ego state. When you move into the adult ego state, your behaviors, your thoughts, and feelings are going to be direct responses to here and now. So basically a very present time. And then when you have the child ego state, these are just three separate bubbles. It's not really a process at all that you're moving from P to A to C. You can utilize them at any one time. So sometimes you might be in the adult ego state, and then you go back to parent, and then you go to child, and then you go to child again. So with the child ego state, you're just basically replaying your behaviors, thoughts, and feelings from childhood. And so that's just one way that we can kind of examine how we interact with one another, and seeing and within each of these different states, you kind of exuberate different characteristics as well. So like from the childhood state, you'd be more curious and creative, playful, and spontaneous, whereas within the parenting state, you're trying to kind of keep yourself safe, be calm, nurturing, and supportive. And then in the adult state, you're more rational, reasonable, logical, independent, not threatening. But then there can also be some other negative interactions that go on within these stages as well, right? Like in the parenting stage, parent ego state rather, you might be controlling or critical or patronizing, versus the child state where you're rebellious or you're insecure about something. So the kind of theory regarding this one is that depending on which state you go with impacts the interactions that you have with other people. And then other people are also going through these stages too. So if one person is in the parent state and another person is in the parent state, how is that interaction going to go? If one's a parent and one's a child, that interaction is going to go perhaps maybe a lot smoother depending on the two family members in question. So it's just kind of fascinating to examine how the interaction regarding this theory between different family members, and perhaps you can kind of think of within your own family, if you're interacting with a parental figure, for instance, maybe you take on the child ego state a lot more because you're talking with your parent, or perhaps since you're an adult or a young adult, you take more of an adult ego stage, and because you take on that adult stage, it's very difficult to talk to that parental figure because they still think that you are going to communicate in the child ego state. So very fascinating, combining sociology, psychology, and communication all in one theory, which is kind of why I like to spend a little bit of time on it, since I think it's kind of illuminates a lot of how our families are complex, and just interacting within our family is complex as well. And that does it for this video. Within this video, we examined different theories. With functionalist theory, we examined Osborne's functions of family. With conflict theory, we talked about how your ascribed statuses can lead to you really struggling in life, and how there's inequality with that. Feminist theory, kind of similar aspect. I'm thinking about the gender role inequality. And then with interactionist theory, they believe family is extremely complex. There's a lot of different definitions to it, which is awesome. We just have to realize that it is complex. And then in case you're just trying to figure out this picture over here, it's just basically a family tree, about family of our different theorists. So I just liked it because I saw Durkheim and Marx, and you guys kind of know who that is. So here's Durkheim. Here's Bourdieu, who we talked about with social networks a little bit a couple weeks ago, and here's Marx, and then here's Weber. So, and then here's C. Wright Mills, and then Goffman. So, lots of good people here. And we've kind of talked about, and here's Compton Spencer too. So, almost highlighted all of these guys, which is pretty cool. But anyway, tangent aside, I'll see you guys next time as we talk more about the family. See you soon.